Well, we were. I was in my producer's house, and we were watching it live because they had the live stream, and I mean, we were both pretty much on edge. I didn't know what way it was going to go, and then Detainment was the first one they called out,
Mm.
so it just took our breath away, when it happened.
Yeah. So I guess even before the nominations were announced, there was a little bit of noise about the film. Did you expect there to be some controversy just because of the nature of the film?
Yeah, I mean, I always expected a certain amount of backlash, because it's such a sensitive subject. But I never expected people to, just start saying things about the film that are untrue. And that's what happens now. I mean, so much of what's been reported about the film just isn't true, and people are really believing it, and understandably, they're outraged because of it.
Mm.
I think I would be as well if I was reading some of the things reported about the film and thinking that they were true. I'd be annoyed as well, and and a lot of it, has now been corrected by, experts connected to the case. Malcolm Stevens made a statement. David James Smith, probably the most renowned expert on the case. They've all come out in support of the film, but it's still very hard to counteract what's been reported because people just haven't seen the film.
So, what, for instance, let's dispel a myth or two now. What is it that's going around that's untrue?
Well, I mean, so like one of the very first reports, was that well, it was from people who hadn't even seen the full film. I think, so the former detective superintendent Albert Kirby, had said that he felt the film, that he would question, that he would question the accuracy of the film. That quickly got reported that the film isn't accurate. But he's since said to the BBC that the film is in fact historically accurate. Um, and and lots of people connected to the case, have said that it's entirely factual. It's entirely factual, and Malcolm Stevens, who was the advisor to the Home Secretary at the time for children who commit serious crimes, and he had regular contact with John Venables and Robert Thompson. There's nobody on the planet that knows both of those boys better than Malcolm Stevens. And he said he was amazed at how accurate they were portrayed, and he didn't think it was ever going to be possible in a film. So it's a great endorsement, from people who are connected to the case.
Mm.
So I mean, that is the first one, that it is absolutely accurate, and and I certainly set out to make a film that was accurate. Um, and also there's a lot of information just which is misleading and leads people to believe that there might be graphic violence in it, or that it's somehow insensitive. And there's no violence whatsoever. The murder is not reenacted in any way. It's and we wanted to make a film that was responsibly made and sensitive to the ongoing trauma as well.
Mm.
So it's hard reading all these things, and people are believing this about the film. But I hope I hope when they finally do see it, it'll diffuse a lot of that.
I think, though, even though there isn't any graphic violence in the film, it is certainly very chilling in how it's told, and I think that there's the film certainly the film certainly affects people. I mean, it affected me quite a lot when I watched it, and I'm sure the family as well, as they seem to be
Sure.
quite
Yeah.
effective. So I guess on the one part that's good, right? Because the film gets seen and it gets talked about. But do you feel there's a responsibility there to the family?
So yeah, and it's I mean the film, yeah, it's a difficult watch because it's about a very difficult subject. If the film was an easy watch, it would undermine the gravity of what happened,
Hmm.
I think. But certainly, I mean, in terms of the family, I did, try to take, their private pain into account, and to try and balance that with the public interest in the story. So there was a lot of things that we didn't include in the film, out of respect for the family. and the victim, and critics who have reviewed the film have specifically acclaimed it, and for being responsibly made and sensitive to the Bulger family. So it is absolutely something that was a priority when we were making the film, to get that balance right, and we didn't want to have anything insensitive in there, and I don't think there is, and people who have seen the film and reviewed it, any experts involved on the case, also agree that it is responsibly made.
So there have been calls by the family themselves for you to withdraw the film. I guess let's just clear this up right now. Are you going to withdraw the film from the Oscars or not?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't, because I think to withdraw it from I think to withdraw it from the Oscars. I mean, and they're not only asking to withdraw it from the Oscars, but also that the film isn't shown publicly anywhere. And I think to do that, it would defeat the purpose of making it. And it was made with an honest purpose. Um, I think I think I think it is, an important contribution to the discussion of the case, because it's something that people can learn from. It's entirely factual, and there's no embellishments there whatsoever. And it's a film that it shows a different perspective. It shows a different perspective, I think, to what people have seen before. But it's certainly not meant to be sympathetic to the killers. It's not meant to humanize them in any way. Or sorry, it's not meant to be sympathetic. It humanizes them. But what I'm saying is, the purpose of the film. It wasn't to humanize these two killers, but it was really to ask questions and to challenge the audience, because I think we've a responsibility to try and make sense of what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the main criticisms is that it some people do think it takes some people do think it takes a sympathetic view to the two killers. But I guess from what I understand about the film, you've just used the transcripts of the interviews, and you've taken a very literal adaptation of that interview and just told it on screen. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, but see, the boys were very different when they were questioned. Robert, for example, he wanted to argue back with the detectives. He had a smart aleck answer for everything. He wanted to argue with he wanted to argue with so it's certainly not sympathetic in any way, with Robert, but with John, he was very emotional during the interviews. He'd be up out of his chair, he's crying hysterically. At one stage he would throw himself in the lap of the detectives for comfort, and then he'd bury his head against his mother and wail, and to show it any other way would simply be inaccurate, because that is what happened. So, people, just aren't very comfortable, I think, seeing that, because a lot of people will feel sympathy for a child when they see them crying, and when it's a child who is killed and committed such a horrific crime. I think people think that we're doing something to make them feel something in this situation, but we absolutely made sure everything was entirely factual. And what Malcolm Stevens said about it, he said he didn't think, he said the film has done what he never thought was, he said the film has done what he never thought was possible with the film, because he didn't think it would ever be possible to get child actors that could show the emotion of what happened during that process. But at the same time, he didn't feel that it was being sympathetic. He said it was that it was being sympathetic. He said it was accurate. And to portray them any other way, it just wouldn't be a true reflection of what happened.
And I mean, certainly credit to the two actors, because they were very impactful performances, very impactful performances. But I was curious to know why you felt firstly that this was your story to tell, and why now.
Well, I certainly didn't think it was my story to tell. Didn't think it was my story to tell. I think it's a case that has affected millions of people all over the world. So, I mean, it's a case that has a huge amount of public interest in it. I don't think you can say it's one person's story to tell. The interview transcripts have been there for 25 years. But at the moment, you know, the public opinion in the UK is that those boys were simply evil, and anybody who suggests an alternate reason or tries to understand why they did it, they get criticised for it or attacked, which is what is happening to me now, you know. But it's happened before, and I absolutely understand why people think of those boys, you know, as being just simply born evil and inherently evil. Because when it happened, I think people couldn't cope with the fact that these were couldn't cope with the fact that these were 2 10-year-old boys, and the only way they could make sense of it was if they were evil. So it's something that, you know, I think people, you know, should try to look past, because just dismissing children as evil can lead to more similar crimes, being committed. And the only way to prevent something similar happening in the future is if we understand the cause of it. So it was in that vein that the film was made, because I think it's important to try and make sense of what happened. The film, you know, I've never claimed that the film has all the answers, but I think it allows people to ask the right questions.
Yeah, and did you reach out to the family as well? Because there's been a lot about that, and one of the arguments that they've been very public about is that you didn't really talk to them or ask them for permission for the film.
Yeah.
So firstly, did you reach out to them at all, and why didn't you feel like you needed their full endorsement?
Sure. I mean, so you know, I never intended any disrespect by not contacting the family, and I've always had enormous sympathy for the Bulger family. I always will have enormous sympathy for them, you know, and we did think, you know, long and hard about the right way to make a film like this, but there's more than one perspective on the case. And we set out to make a film that was entirely fact-based, but most importantly, a film that was impartial. So for that reason, we didn't attempt to contact any of the families involved, and instead we relied solely on the factual material and the interview transcripts, which have been public knowledge for 25 years. And I think if we were to contact, you know, one family, there would be pressure to tell it the way they would like it to be told, and contacting the families wouldn't change what's in the transcripts, but, you know, most likely it would change what would be in the film, and then you're suppressing information, or you're telling a version of the truth, and I think that would have defeated the purpose of making the film. It would have been a very different film, and it wouldn't have been impartial. I mean, the only way to make it impartial is to, you know, take the transcripts as a Bible, and to make it without putting an opinion on it.
But do you think there is some responsibility as a filmmaker with material such as this, where you almost have to make a choice that either the family kind of buy into what you want to do, and you make it like that, you concede that some things have to change and make a slightly different version of the film, or if they're not willing to endorse it, you don't make it at all?
Well, most likely that's what would have happened. You know, I completely understand, you know, how the Bulger family, you know, would never be able to see those 2 boys as anything other than simply being evil, and I would never expect them to. You know, I think that's completely understandable, that they have that opinion. But but I think, for as a society, I think it is important that we can look past that and to try and understand what could lead these two 10-year-old boys to kill. I think it's important for there to be a debate on it, and not just to have this story told from one perspective only, because there is more than one perspective on the case, and I would hope that people would have a debate as to how and why this could have happened. I mean, even if you go back to what the trial judge at the time, what he said when he was decided to release their identities, the reason he gave was because he wanted there to be an informed debate on it. He wanted people to look into their backgrounds and to try and understand what could have led them, to do this. And that hasn't happened, because the popular opinion at the moment now is that those boys were just simply evil, and that's the reason people give for it. And I think we have a responsibility, not just to the victim, not just to the perpetrators, but to ourselves as a society to make sense of what happened.
Mm. And in hindsight, do you still think this was the right time to tell the film, considering the reaction to it?
I mean, I don't know. Is there ever going to be a right time? Is there ever going to be a right time? It's been, it's been almost 26 years, and it is still enormously sensitive. I mean, do you think it's too soon? Is that the question you're asking?
I mean, I guess, as you say, it's a difficult thing to make a film about whenever. But I guess now that you've seen how the film has been received, some of the good and the bad things that people have said about it, would you change how you made it, or when you released it?
Who's actually seen the film?
How you made it, or when you released it?
Who's actually seen the film hasn't actually been criticizing it. The problem is people aren't seeing the film, and they're the ones, who are most outraged, because they think it's a very different film, and I think if they did see the film, they wouldn't have the same opinion. So, I mean, I would urge people to, read reviews that have been written by experts who have studied this case, like David James Smith, who wrote the definitive book on it, and Malcolm Stevens, who worked with those boys. They're saying that the film is absolutely, entirely accurate, and that it's the most accurate version that has ever been made. So I think people have been given an opinion before they've seen the film, and I think if ever there was a film that needs to be seen before it's judged, it is this one.
I mean, fair point. I think that's a solid note for any film critic. Watch it before you comment. But on that note, are you planning to get it out there and try and get it, say, televised, or what's next for the film?
Well, yeah, I mean, so now that it's one of the 5 Oscar-nominated short films, the distribution wing of the Academy, the Shorts International, put it together as a package with the 5 films. So it will be shown with the other Oscar-nominated short films. It'll be shown all over the world.